Thank you all for coming today to the listening session for medium and heavy duty incentives. So today's goal is to learn a little bit more about what the legislative direction is and to gain your feedback regarding incentives for medium and heavy duty transitions to zero emission vehicles. As you know, we're recording this so we can continue to revisit your valued feedback and include it within our report. All right, so we'll get started here. So DEQ is leading this effort with support from ODOT. The DEQ team includes more than what's listed on here, but who are attending today includes myself, and I work in air quality planning and headquarters at DEQ. Corianne Wind, who manages the Clean Fuels program, Rachel Sakata, Eric Feely, and Garrick Kransky. And from ODOT, we have Mary Brazel and Jillian DeMedio. So House Bill 5202 provides the direction for the MHD incentive report. I'm just going to read it straight out. It's on your screen, but just so we're all starting from the same place. And I want to let you guys know we'll have most of this meeting dedicated to questions and answers because this is the point, is to really get your feedback and understand your thoughts about this. And we'll be using the Q&A function as well as the raise hand function. I just have a couple of slides that I'm going to get through just to sort of set the stage for those of you joining a couple minutes late. All right, so DEQ and ODOT are directed to report back to the Joint Transportation Committee and Appropriate Budget Committee by December 1st, 2022. So it's a pretty quick turnaround, with an analysis of existing incentives available to support the transition to medium and heavy duty zero emission transportation. The agencies are also directed to research incentives offered in other states and to provide recommendations on expanding or creating incentives to support businesses in the transition to zero emission medium and heavy duty vehicles. So from now on, that zero emission piece, I'm just going to use the acronym ZEV. So this effort needs to include an analysis on incentives for both vehicles and electric charging or other infrastructure. So again, we're talking about both the vehicle and the infrastructure to support it. In 2021, DEQ collected survey responses to better understand the barriers that fleets face in adopting alternative fuels, including ZEV. There were over 200 responses and 13 different sectors from across the state that responded to that survey. And the survey asked respondents to describe the main barriers and concerns to switching medium and heavy duty vehicles. Most of the responses really fell into one of four categories: access and infrastructure, cost concerns, both for vehicles and the infrastructure itself, the education, outreach, and training, as it's a lot for fleets to have to understand the different types of incentives, as well as understand how this should be incorporated into their fleet planning. And then general cost and access for both vehicles and fuels, depending on what type of vehicle they were hoping to transition to. So from that, the next step for us is really to understand what the right incentives are in order to help our fleets do this. That is why we're here today. So we have a few things that we're hoping to touch on and to get your feedback about, but the majority of the rest of the time is actually going to just be listening to what you guys feel your needs are. So one of the things we're very interested in is if there are additional challenges that have prevented transition to ZEVs that haven't already been elucidated from the last survey. And for those of you who have participated in vehicle or charging incentive programs, what did you like or not like about that and why? And are there key considerations for public versus private incentives? And that goes for both vehicles and charging. Are there pros or cons of various funding mechanisms that you guys want to talk about today? So voucher systems versus grants, rebates, loans, there's lots of different mechanisms that can be used. And then do you have any lessons learned or other considerations that you'd like to share? This is just a few of the things we're hoping to get feedback on, but I'm sure you guys have a wealth of information on what you think would make sense for this transition. So that's really all I wanted to start us off with. So I'm actually going to open this up. If you can either raise your hands or use the Q&A function. I'd love to know your name, and if you're with an agency or an association or a fleet, that would be great information to have. Yeah, so we're opening up to questions.
Hey Morgan, this is Corey.
Hi Corey.
Are you gonna leave this slide up, or do you want to unshare your screen? And then I guess in that case, did you want to like throw these questions in the chat so people can remember what they are?
I think to make it a little more intimate, I'm going to stop screen sharing and I'm going to throw these questions in the chat. But if anyone needs them, email to them, just ask in the chat and I can make that happen very quickly. All right, I'm going to stop sharing here. And I've asked Corey to help me keep track of the hands in the question boxes.
Okay, so we do have a couple of folks that have raised their hands, and actually I'm going to ask a question that's in the chat already first, because I think it's kind of general question. I think Neil asked about whether there would be opportunities to comment after this meeting.
Absolutely. If you don't want to comment today, we will accept comments via email, and my email should have been included in the announcement, and I'll make sure to put that in the chat as well. This is just the first listening session. We hope, well, we will be doing a second one as well, as when we have more structure to our report, so that we have more specificity that we can ask and get feedback on. So this is just our first initial big picture listening session. So there will be other opportunities. Great question. Thank you for asking it.
Mm-hmm. Okay, then we'll go to the first of the raised hands, then Eric Zander.
Perfect. Yeah. Good morning. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Great. So my name is Eric Zander. I am the COO of Omega Morgan, and we are a specialty transportation, heavy haul, crane rigging, and machine removing company based in Hillsboro, Oregon. We've got about 300 vehicles in our fleet. And talking a little bit about challenges, one of the big ones for us is the technology is just not there right now. So for some of these final mile fleets, I understand that it kind of works for them. They go out, they make their run around town, they're hauling less than 80,000 and they come home. And there's some solutions in place, albeit expensive. There's some solutions in place. For us, we probably deliver more power transformers than anyone else to our local utilities, both large and small in the state of Oregon. And so our trip typically originates at a port, and then we go to, any number of towns, within Oregon, whether that be Portland or whether that be Coburg or whether that be, Drain, Oregon. And there's not a lot of facilities in Drain, Oregon, mind you, for charging. Additionally, with the type of loads that we're hauling, which usually start at about 200,000 pounds gross and go all the way up to 1 million pounds, they aren't making trucks that can handle that load, and they aren't making trucks that can handle that load with the distance that we need to require to travel, between stops, because typically we're restricted to, night movements at certain times. And so that's a big issue for us, and for the rest of the heavy haul world, is the technology just isn't there yet. Additionally, and it's something that I don't know if a lot of people thought about, but we also have a crane fleet similar to that which you see in my background, right? And those are mobile all-terrain cranes, which are licensed in the state of Oregon and have to drive on the roads, right? And currently there's not a crane company out there that's making, for instance, a 350-ton all-terrain crane like you see in the background. So even if I wanted to, I couldn't get my hands on it. Additionally, these cranes typically have what's called a lower and an upper, 2 different engines. And some of them have one, but then when you get to the job site, you have to run all day long, right? And, job sites typically don't have a place to plug in either with the type of power that we would need to charge if they had a crane that was all electric, which they don't. So those are kind of some of the challenges that we're facing. It's not a question of if we want to adopt or not, it's we can't because the OEMs aren't making the product.
Thank you, Eric. That's very informative. Thank you. Who's next? Corey?
Let's see who's next. I think Brett Stevens is next.
Yeah, thank you. Can you guys hear me?
We can.
Awesome. Brett Stevens. I'm with Daimler Trucks North America, based here in Portland. And I'd first just like to thank the agencies for holding this listening session. I do think this is a good opportunity to pull in industry stakeholders. And Eric, I apologize, I won't be able to solve your problem in the immediate future with our new trucks that were just released a few weeks ago, but hoping to expand into that use case in the future. My role at Daimler is as a customer incentive consultant. So my job is to help connect, whether that be grant, rebate, voucher funding, with our customers looking to deploy units in their region. So I have some experience in these, and I'm really excited about seeing these programs come out of Oregon so I can get the trucks that I've spent the last 3 years helping the development and design on in my backyard. So this is definitely exciting. Some of the lessons learned that I can share with DEQ and ODOT would be make the programs easy. There's a lot of really good benchmarks out there, and I will speak directly to the HVIP program sponsored by CARB. I see your head nod, and that's definitely what I'd consider to be a more benchmark program. It is as close as you get to cash on the hood for these trucks, because at the end of the day, we need to get as close as possible to parity with a diesel unit. And cash on the hood at the acquisition time is one of the best ways to do that. As far as the voucher amounts, again, I'd like to point to HVIP as a good model, as that has been able to move the needle for a lot of the fleets. And in regards to the limitations that program does not have, that have hindered us in the past, is certain requirements like scrappage. There was a lot of Volkswagen money that's gone around to replace diesels in the past, but it requires scrappage. A lot of the large fleets that have the capital to not only invest in the new equipment, but also in the infrastructure required, don't have older vehicles to scrap. A lot of our large fleets cycle vehicles out in 4 to 5 years and put them into the used truck market, which for these early adopters, they really are the prime candidate, the larger organizations that have the opportunity to leverage this into their operation. And that helps also seed the used truck, electric truck market as well. So I'd really strongly encourage DEQ and DOT to not limit fleet sizes in this endeavor, and make sure that the larger organizations still have access to this money. As far as not necessarily around the vouchers or vehicle incentives, utilities have been our biggest bottleneck on the utility readiness side. Switchgear, transformers, thanks Eric for delivering them when they show up. But speaking with PG&E down in California, in Southern California Edison, they're looking at 12 to 18 months from the first conversation to infrastructure readiness. And that is a significant delay. So as far as how any program could help mitigate that, is be flexible with deployment timelines. As long as customers are going with proven OEMs that have a track record of delivering on time, if there is delays driven by infrastructure readiness, be patient and understanding. These fleets and the customers looking to make this transition are truly early adopters. They're excited about this. They want it. It's not just an environmental sustainability goal for them. They're excited about the trucks. They've driven them. They're ready to add them to their fleet. There's other barriers though that draw the timelines a little longer than we'd like. So just be open to how long sometimes it takes to get the conduit where it needs to be for the infrastructure side.
Great, Brett. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hey, up next, Alan Bates.
Good afternoon. Just wanted to highlight, so I'm City of Portland. We have about 2,600 vehicles in our fleet that we manage, trying to transition and decarbonize. And one of, there's many barriers, but for us right now, infrastructure is one of the biggest that we're trying to overcome. We do have, thankfully, partnership, with our local utility, with one of the local utilities that's helping to create some of that make ready. It's not that necessarily that we can solve all of it today, but in terms of consistency, we have we have vehicles in both, Portland General Electric and Pacific Power territory. We're not alone, but we're essentially, we're just really encouraging Pacific Power, who I know is on this call, to to strongly look at the program that has been set up by PGE. And I think they know this, and we're excited to get started. But I just want to underscore the importance of that program. That a fleet partner program really helps to get that make ready in place. It's critical for for our fleet and other fleets that the fuel that's coming. They really control that, and so we have many vehicles and many parking spaces. We want to have the same consistent sort of programs in both territories. So just underscoring that point.
Thank you, Alan.
Okay, I think next up we have Jason Coranto.
Hi, yes, I'm Jason Coranto with Hazen Motors, and we are a fuel cell vehicle company. And we just, first of all, thank you so much for doing this. And then, want to also make sure that you all are engaged with the Hydrogen Hub program at the Department of Energy. It's a multi-billion-dollar grant program designed to bring hydrogen to the market from production to end use. We have vehicles running drayage right now at the Port of Long Beach in California, and just look forward to working with you on having this grant program be a success for not just electric fuel vehicles, but for hydrogen as well.
Thank you, Jason.
Next up, Keith Wilson.
Thank you, Corey. Thank you, Morgan, for this opportunity. I appreciate it. I want to give you some of the lessons that I've learned recently with electrifying my fleet. But before so, I want to just talk about the arc of where Oregon is compared to California, and then we'll get to the HVIP program. So Oregon has a clean fuels program that was really designed to match up with the LCFS system in California, and they're both set to harmonize in 2030. We both have a cap and trade, albeit ours is called a climate protection program. While it's not going to work the same way, it's still set up to really put a cost on carbon, so we'll value it. We also have CCIs, which are California Climate Investments, which also are part of our climate protection program, but ours are called Community Climate Investments. We have the ACT, or the Advanced Clean Transportation. So those four rulings all match up in almost the acronyms, as well as how the systems work. Now, they each have a different flavor on our jurisdiction versus California, but the overall point is we're marrying up our systems along with Washington and British Columbia in the Pacific Coast Collaborative. The goal is to create this electric highway, or this electric ribbon, so we're all a part of the same group. So not one state advantages the other. So if somebody has operations in California and Oregon, we can operate and still focus on buying the same piece of equipment, but not try and have a cost of ownership that's different among jurisdictions. Specifically, lessons learned: electric trucks are expensive. So I've got 6 electric trucks on the way. They won't be built until the new year. So even though I've purchased them, they're still a year away. The electric truck I have is going to be north of $400,000. A diesel emission equivalent is $130,000. It's a huge lift. It's initially going to throw everybody off and say, I can't handle the CapEx, unless we have help through the government to transition with that. Now, Brett mentioned it earlier about infrastructure. We have a Swiss cheese operations here in Oregon where PGE is moving forward with their make ready. I have 6 charging stations going in, and it's going to cost me north of $600,000. I'm just lucky that I'm in the PGE area and they're helping me with the cost. If I were in the Pacific Power area, they don't have the same program, so I would be at a disadvantage. So in California, they do have an electric utility ruling that requires the utilities to offer make-ready type system. We need to give Pacific Power that same advantage, and they have to be matched up to where it's not the zip code that determines where I electrify my fleet. It's just simply I can go to all 4 corners of Oregon and still electrify my fleet. It shouldn't be based on zip code, which is already a disadvantage of carriers throughout Oregon. We need to bring the rural economies and the urban economies and make sure that they're matched up and one doesn't have an advantage over the other. I did put in the PGE total cost of ownership into the chat, so I encourage you to look at it. With incentives, you can see if you can make money using electric trucks or not. I am very fortunate I have the VW grant to help me. They're covering 75% of the 6 trucks and my infrastructure. Without that, it would be a burden, or I wouldn't be able to afford the system at all. As far as forklifts go, perfect example. Forklifts has been around for, electric forklifts have been around for 60 years, yet they only represent 60% of the market right now. Yet, if I buy a forklift today at $45,000, its propane partner is $30,000. Now the capital is much higher, but I pay $3 per day duty cycle for my electric forklift, and I pay $30 per day for my propane. That difference allows my payback to earn income after 24 months. I am making money on the 25th month and thereafter for the next 8 years because the duty cycle is 10 years. But yet the market share is only 60% for electric. So it just shows you, without incenting this capital, without helping carriers, even if the TCO is that great on the forklift, people still won't move to it. Now, there are application issues, I understand that. But for the most part, in my LTL industry, my competitors are all using propane. I'm one of the only ones using electric, and I'm eating their lunch, but they're still not converting over, even though the cost is so much better and I'm at a competitive advantage in earning more income because of that. Now, as far as incentives, I put the HVIP program into the chat as well. So if I were to buy an electric truck today in California, I'm going to earn $120,000 credit. And I think we should do the exact same. If we do any less, it's going to encourage me to buy trucks in California over Oregon. If we do any more, we don't have the budget to sustain that. We just need to do more of a Goldilocks approach where it's just right. And it's going to allow carriers to purchase that equipment where they can use it most, California or Oregon. And then the final point I'd like to make, I have heard that Senator Wyden through the Finance Committee is looking at a 30% incentive. I like incentives better that are based on percentage because it really encourages the equipment cost to come down, and the overall budget for our state would fall as well as the equipment becomes lower cost. While that's not a reality right now, while that's the future, in lieu of that future benefit, I would say that DEQ and ODOT should pursue the HVIP program to the letter. Again, we've harmonized our 2 states to go lockstep. So let's not go and do something that's different. Let's just marry it up and move forward with the HVIP program. So thank you very much for this time. I really appreciate this opportunity and the audience.
Thank you, Keith.
Okay, Lex, next up, let's go to Alex Shea. Alex, are you there? Alex, I think you can unmute yourself. Okay. Maybe we'll come back to you and check your audio, but there is your comment that you put in the chat. I just wanted to give you the opportunity to speak as well. Let's see, what's next? Jeremiah Jones.
Hello, my name is Jeremiah Jones. I represent the Confederated Tribes of the Umatilla Indian Reservation in Pendleton, Oregon. 2 things that comes to mind for us over here. We have a smaller fleet that we're going to be transitioning over. We don't have the hundreds of vehicles like some of the bigger carriers. But being that we're in rural Oregon, what we're running into right off the bat is even decent charging infrastructure for cars, let alone medium and heavy duty vehicles. And so I have reached out to both of our main power supply companies to get them involved, to try to start talking about lining infrastructure along the I-84 corridor between here and Baker City, because that's where some of our transits go and some of our fleet that does go and stuff. So I'm on board with everybody else by saying we really need to get with the power companies to try and have them help or get them help to try and lay out here in rural America where we all want to get to this point. The second part about all of this, my only comment or concern is when the funding is divvied up, if it is in grant form, because there's such a huge delay from date of order to date of delivery, I would like to see there to be instead of a 12-month or 24-month to spend the grant money or however it's going to be divvied up. If it is grant, we would like to see that it's longer term because it does take that long for us to implement that infrastructure. We have a couple grants that we utilize right now to buy infrastructure for our vehicles, and we have a very, very short amount of time limit to get it spent and actually on the road. And so for us smaller communities and smaller tribes that want to start to implement this, we need more time than the bigger cities because we are rural America. So we're going to get put on the bottom of the list constantly because if we're ordering one truck compared to the company in Portland, Oregon that's ordering 50, we're going to get put in the back burner. And so however the money is divvied up to help with this, whether it be incentives, loans, if it is grant, we just need more time to implement the actual vehicles. And I look forward to being on more of these calls with everybody. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeremiah. I appreciate that feedback. Alex, I'm going to try and unmute you because I see your message in the chat. I'm not sure it's going to work, but I'm going to give it a shot. Let me know if that worked. Don't think so. All right. Well, I will keep trying, Alex. In the meantime, Corey, who's our next participant?
I think we have next up, we have Nava from WRI.
Hi, yes, thank you. I'm Nava Siddiq from World Resources Institute's Electric School Bus Initiative. Thank you so much for providing this opportunity for all of us to provide input. I'd just like to start out by saying that we do commend Oregon for its existing incentives and efforts to electrify medium and heavy duty vehicles, including the adoption of the Advanced Clean Trucks rule. I'm going to speak a bit about what I'm most familiar with, which is electric school buses. So as you may already be aware, the EPA recently launched its Clean School Bus Rebate Program and will continue to roll out other iterative funding programs over the next 5 years, up to $5 billion in funding per the bipartisan infrastructure law. And I'm here to encourage Oregon DOT and DEQ to be engaged in encouraging folks to apply for Clean School Bus Program funding, whether that's via outreach to school districts or through providing technical assistance, and in all these efforts, prioritizing communities with the fewest resources. I'd also like to encourage Oregon to take advantage of these federal funds by providing state funds that can be stacked with those federal funds or local funding sources to cover the difference in upfront costs, which, as everyone has mentioned, is a current barrier to adoption of all electric medium and heavy duty vehicles, including electric school buses. And types of incentives that we've seen in other states can include things like rebates and grants, as we know, but also things like sales tax exemptions and financing opportunities. And for equity purposes, as others have also mentioned, point of sale vouchers are the best way to move forward because communities with the fewest resources may not have that money to put up front and then be reimbursed later. So point of sale vouchers can help to remove that equity barrier, and removing these equity barriers is really important and can have huge effects in EJ communities as they rely most heavily on school buses for transportation and also face the worst effects of air pollution. So just overall wanted to put a note in there on electric school buses that can get lost, but the entire effort for medium heavy duty electrification is great, and we look forward to joining future listening sessions and hearing what you all plan to do. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, next up is Jeff Hazen.
Hi there, I'm Jeff Hazen with Sunset Empire Transportation District up in the northwest corner of the state in Clatsop County. And electric transit buses is something I've been looking at for several years and been unsuccessful in getting any of the low-no grants that have been made available to us. But that being said, I'm kind of in a sticky wicket right now because in order for us to further go after electrification of our fleet or other alternative fuels, we have to move our operations facility because we have literally ran out of room to park any buses or to even consider putting in any charging infrastructure or fueling infrastructure. And we're probably 5 years out on that. So that's going to be a big lift for us. I'm not sure how I'm going to pay for that yet, but we'll figure something out when it comes time. The other thing that's become a challenge for us in wanting to electrify the fleet, the low-no grants that I've gone after have just been for a pilot program for one bus. And now the FTA is no longer doing that. They're putting a 6-bus minimum. So that really takes us completely out of that program because the match on 6 buses would be very cost prohibitive for us. One of the things that I'm excited about, I'm glad Jeremiah was talking about hydrogen fuel cells. I also have been watching that and was very impressed a few years ago when I went back to Ohio to a zero emission bus conference where one of the local transit agencies, their whole fleet, or almost their whole fleet, is hydrogen fuel cell. And they were one of the early adopters, and I got to see their fueling station, how that worked. And those buses have a little bit better range, which is important for us in rural because the range on most of the buses right now, the technology is not there. Our buses go from anywhere from 200 to 600 miles a day. And it doesn't work for us. So anyway, I just wanted to let you know that rural transit agencies are looking at this, but we need the technology not only on the infrastructure, but the buses to improve before we can actually jump in.
Thank you for that feedback, Jeff.
Okay, next up is Alex Cervenka, Kenworth. Alec, are you there? Can you unmute yourself?
I am here. I just had a face mask caught on my ear, but so yeah, Alex Cervenka, Kenworth Truck Company, and I'm got a similar role as Brett, so EV grant and technical advisor, basically working with fleets all across North America as they move towards zero emission vehicles. One thing that I wanted to add as far as sort of the eligibility requirements in a lot of these programs, specifically in Oregon, I've had a lot of interested parties, but they currently get caught up by not having a kind of like a proper scrappage vehicle that fits. To understand with Volkswagen settlement funding, it has to be 2009 or older, which is, just kind of the way it's written, which is fine. But I think in the future, if there was a kind of a different method where fleets would be able to purchase a vehicle that's currently in use as scrappage, and this is something that New York have started doing with their New York Truck Voucher Incentive Program. And it's kind of opened it up for a lot of fleets because, as we mentioned earlier, I mean, a lot of the fleets that do have and customers that do have the capital to jump on board with a new zero emission vehicle typically don't have 20-year-old trucks to scrap. It's kind of a non-intersecting Venn diagram. But in the spirit of the program, if they were able to kind of purchase a vehicle from another fleet, take that one off the road, and then I don't know if they wanted to sell a compliant vehicle to that fleet or just apply outright for new funding for a zero emission vehicle. But just kind of an interesting thing I saw over in New York, and thought I would bring it to this coast and see if there was any interest there. So.
Thank you, Alec.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, next up, Kate Hawley, Pacific Core.
Yes, thank you so much. I wanted to thank everybody for providing their thoughts and feedbacks, and also just give a little bit of insight into what we're doing right now this year to start investigating a similar program to Portland General Electric. So we're undergoing a fleet market assessment to try and right size a pilot program that would model like very much after PGE's Fleet Partner Program. And so we're actually in the process of reaching out to customers within our territory to do a key set of interviews, kind of somewhat similar to this listening session, but digging in a little bit deeper into vehicle size and plans. And so from there, we then are going to develop our program application and have that be part of our transportation electrification plan that's going to be filed here by the end of this year or early next year. So I do want to just thank everyone for their thoughts and feedback. If you're interested in participating in our kind of market assessment and getting your name thrown in the hat so we can start to kind of hear from you, I would love to get sent your information if at all possible. And I think there's a lot for us to go and move forward, and just want to thank everyone for their comments.
Thank you, Kate. Appreciate the information.
Okay, next I think we'll go to another Kate Lyman from Trimet.
Hi, thank you. I'm Kate Lyman from Trimet. Trimet is the public transportation agency serving Portland. We have a fleet of about 700 buses today, and they are mainly powered by diesel. And we have stated our intention to our community to fully transition away from diesel buses. I want to just mention a couple of things that have echoed a few of the other comments that have already been mentioned. We would also support incentives being fuel agnostic. At Trimet, despite the fact that we're an urban transit agency, we have a lot of the same challenges that Jeff mentioned that are existing in the northwest corner of the state. Range is a big issue for us. And so while we do think that our fleet will include battery electric buses, we are also very interested in fuel cell electric buses. So incentives that are fuel agnostic would be, we would support that. I will say, though, that for our agency, looking at fuel cell electric buses, the big question is where we would get the hydrogen. We are a fairly large agency. We would need a lot of hydrogen, and right now we don't know where that would come from. So that's our big challenge in thinking through that future. And then the second thing I want to mention, again, similar to Jeff, is that our bus garages, our facilities where we house our fleet, they're all pretty much full today. And introducing this new technology, either way, whether it be a hydrogen fueling station or battery electric bus chargers, takes up valuable real estate. And so we will need to expand our fleet storage areas, and that is very expensive. And so the ability of the state to support our need to not just buy the actual, physical charging infrastructure, but also support sort of facility expansion in general would really help our agency to meet our zero emissions goals. Thank you.
Thank you, Kate. Valuable information. Appreciate it.
Okay, next up, Neil Bonsgaard from Environmental Center.
Hi, thanks so much for putting this together. And it's been really great to hear some of the similarities and interesting challenges from slightly different segments of the medium and heavy duty market. I'm gonna kind of piggyback on some of the comments that Nava had mentioned from WRI. My name is Neil Bonsgaard. I work for a nonprofit here in Central Oregon called the Environmental Center. And I'm also one of the co-founders of the Electric Bus Learning Project, focused on school bus electrification. So we've had a lot of experience directly working with school districts as they kind of go from interest to application of electric school buses being added to their fleet. One of the challenges that we've seen with other programs that kind of can throw districts or throw folks into a tailspin is just seeing some better alignment with the current air quality programs and the carbon reduction goals that are coming from similar places statewide. It's challenging when trying to build out your fleet when programs are pulling fleet directors into different directions. And it's frustrating from the perspective that we have when there are significant investments and incentives made that only accomplish one of those two goals, where you might only accomplish air quality investments, but you're incenting the deployment of new vehicles that will have the same carbon emissions over the life of their vehicle. So that's why we focus primarily on battery electric vehicles and kind of reserving hydrogen for the great heavy duty examples that have been mentioned here just ensuring that that hydrogen, if incented, also kind of similarly is focusing on the source of that hydrogen, so it's not also coming from fossil fuels with carbon emission pieces to that. That's what I largely have. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Neil. Appreciate it. Who's next?
I think we have next Tim Miller.
All right, thank you very much for this discussion. I really appreciate that you all are digging into this because it's an important topic. I represent Oregon Business for Climate, and we have about 100 businesses across the state who are really concerned about addressing climate change and wanting to take a look at their own emissions, covering about 30,000 employees. But it's a range of businesses who aren't like a lot of the experts you have on this call, right? You're hearing from folks who have fleets or who are fleet experts, or Keith is one of our members. He's an expert, but most of our members are not experts at this. So I just want to really re-emphasize the point that you made in your initial scopes and findings about education. I would say that another way to look at education is a lot of these folks aren't looking to be educated about this. They're looking for an easy solution. So, it seems to me like if there were a way that somebody could answer 10 questions and it's, what are you looking for, this or that? Are you charging on-site or off-site? Are you looking for big or smaller? Some basic questions, you could probably get them down to, hey, these are the 4 grants and utility programs that might make sense for you. Some of that navigator kind of functionality, I think, could be super helpful. I would say, just sort of building it from a customer-centered approach, because these are, might be a design firm that has a few service vehicles running around, a coffee roaster that has 10 delivery vans, somebody who has some pickups, a contracting firm who has some trucks, but this is not their main focus, right? So, and then another comment related to that would be some of these organizations, companies we represent. Let's say they have 10 delivery vehicles. Those vehicles are going to age over some period of time. I want to just echo one of the prior comments about giving enough time for grants and programs to unfold. So if somebody could say, hey, here's my 5-year plan to electrify my fleet. I know that 3 of these vehicles are going to be they're going to age out in 2 years. Great, we'll do those. In year 4, we'll do a couple more. In year 5, we'll do the remainder. But we need a plan, and the charging infrastructure needs to go in at the beginning of that plan. So all those issues, I just really appreciate you all digging into this and for your help. Thank you.
Thank you, Tim.
Okay, next up, Greg Alderson.
Hey there, Greg Alderson from Portland General Electric. A few observations to share in the work that PGE does, not just with private fleets, but also with public fleets and through our electric school bus program, through the Clean Fuels program, in addition to our fleet partner program that several of the fleet operators have mentioned today. We are, we see a lot of interest from fleets we talk to in the HVIP model that's been mentioned a couple times. So just wanted to underscore that that's a good model to look at. That we have seen rebates to generally be to the liking of fleets that we work with. Also would point DEQ to the EPA's Clean School Bus program that I think somebody mentioned earlier. There's there's a lot to like about that model. It provides a standard rebate amount based on the type of technology and the class of vehicle. It prioritizes funding in underserved communities, but then awards the rest of the projects based on lottery. It provides funding once the purchase order is cut, but before the vehicle is delivered and invoiced, so fleets don't have to have the capital on hand up front, which can be very helpful. So there's a lot of value in that model to look at as well. So just wanted to highlight those two for ODOT and DEQ as you think about how to structure in these recommendations incentives for vehicle purchasing.
Thank you, Greg.
Okay, next, Stuart from Bailtech.
Hi, thanks y'all for the opportunity to talk today. Appreciate it, and give you all comments. Just a couple things. So Biotech, first of all, we make hydrogen generating equipment, and also high pressure transports. So you can see, for example, how you do a pilot, right? You take a high pressure transport at 520 bar, you can direct fuel a vehicle at 350 bar. So one way to support and get things started. A couple points I would make for y'all. One is that charging and performance of heavy duty electric vehicles has certainly been a challenge, and a lot of markets have demonstrated that. So if you see that, for example, in the bus experiences that have happened here in California, such as folks like Foothill Transit, Orange County Transit, and AC Transit, take a look at their studies, for example, that compare fuel cell electric buses versus battery electric buses. And you'll find that a lot of transit agencies have use for both, right? So try and keep incentives open-minded and balanced between hydrogen and electricity, I would echo, as a few other people have. I'd also say there's a lot of noise out in the market about the colors of hydrogen and where it comes from. And it's very important to understand that and to track it. But more than colors, I would encourage Oregon to follow the path of California or the country of the UK, for example, that have approaches that grade hydrogen based on carbon intensity. It's important because it allows sustainability and cost to be graded consistently and understand how those things relate to one another without including or excluding things explicitly. And after all, what's sort of the point of making hydrogen out of state, liquefying it at great expense, carbon intensity, and making it vulnerable to supply chain interruptions by liquefying it and driving it in a diesel truck when you can make it locally and score it that way? I'd encourage you to level the playing field in that regard and drive competition by using a numeric well-to-wheel standard, therefore, that takes into account all of the emissions associated with production, distribution, and use of the hydrogen before it ever gets into the vehicle that it's being used in. That can be done on a numeric basis, like using the GREET model, like California does, like DOE does, and is being used across the country in many cases successfully. Finally, I'd add, don't ignore off-road vehicles and diesel replacement for generators or other things like that, right? Pollution, carbon, smog, NOx coming out of off-road sources are just as important to think about, such as the conversation earlier with Eric, earlier on cranes, for example. Those things should be incentivized as well with a similar type opportunity to participate, because where the pollution comes from doesn't really matter. It's just a matter of how much it puts out, and trying to get those incentives to apply equally to different sources would be great. Thanks a lot, appreciate it.
Thank you, Stuart.
Okay, next up, Tom Van Heek from Rivian.
Hey, good afternoon. Thanks all again for convening this conversation, really important, and we're glad to be a part of it. Tom Van Heek, I'm Senior Policy Advisor at Rivian Automotive. We're a manufacturer of all electric adventure vehicles, and I'll just apologize for not having video this afternoon. You'll just have my voice here disembodied. Just a couple of quick comments here. In general, when we offer our perspectives as a manufacturer on ZEV incentive design as a matter of principle, I think echoing what others have said, point of sale rebates are better. Broadly available rebates that are available to the full range of fleets out there are better. Generally, capping these based on fleet size just introduces hurdles and creates problems for market growth. And I'd also encourage DEQ to ensure that any incentive is available to the full range of medium heavy duty ZEV products, including Class 2B medium duty pickups. This is a huge share of the medium heavy duty fleet. They do a lot of work, but not every incentive program that targets this sector across the country scopes those vehicles in. And that certainly creates a bit of a challenge.
Thank you.
I think in general, the More EV Trucks program in Massachusetts is not a bad one to look at as a model to adapt and adopt as you're looking at design. And I'll leave it there, and thank you again, and looking forward to the rest of this process.
Thank you, Tom. And I think our last hand is Kristen Adams with AGC.
Hi, thanks for the opportunity to comment. Kirsten Adams with Associated General Contractors. We represent commercial construction throughout the state. I wanted to flag a couple additional challenges that we've seen with this transition in the construction industry. One of them is the range issue that's been brought up before. If you have more remote job sites, that can cause some issues switching over to ZEVs. And then also planning issues. Companies have purchased diesel trucks with a plan to have them for a while as part of their business plan. And so requiring a transition can create a problem with that, in that it upends that business planning and their overall model. So kind of taking into account that the vehicles that have been purchased recently are purchased as part of a long-term plan. So kind of thinking of how that impacts the transition as well. Thank you for the opportunity to offer some comments.
Thank you, Kristen. Well, we got a couple more hands, but we're running tight on time. So Corey, who's next?
Yeah, why don't we go to Michael Graham next?
Thanks. I know you're all were hoping to get away without hearing from me. Sorry, Morgan and Corey. Michael Graham with Clean Cities. We currently manage a handful of federal grants for vehicle replacement, deployment, and help fleets participate in other incentive opportunities across the state, including VW program, tax incentives, et cetera. So I think a lot of the feedback that I would provide would also hinge upon what your program goals are going to be. Are they going to be emission reduction? Are they going to be tailpipe emission reduction, greenhouse gas emission reduction, catalyzing the zero emission vehicle marketplace, that sort of thing, as well as what kind of incentive structure you come up with. You know, I feel like there's three main categories. There's tax credits, vouchers, and then grant focused rebates. Each have their pros and cons. For tax credits, I would strongly encourage pass through for non-private entities. For vouchers, creating a carve out for smaller fleets that maybe could benefit from the vouchers just as much as the larger fleets. And then for rebates, the one consideration is, as mentioned, having the capital on hand to cover the costs. In any incentive program that you come up with, I would strongly encourage allowing on-road and off-road. Some of the current programs maybe do allow for off-road, but don't level the playing field to help see those projects actually funded. I wouldn't include any geographic restrictions around funding projects across the state. I would steer away from any eligibility lists for vehicles, equipment, or charging infrastructure. I would encourage offering funding to help cover administrative costs for third parties to help prepare them. I would incorporate funding for near zero options that can prove they are using a low carbon and renewable fuels such as renewable diesel, biodiesel, renewable propane, renewable hydrogen, renewable natural gas, et cetera. I understand that this program is mainly focused around zero emission vehicles, but I had to get that shameless plug in there anyway. And then let's see. I would also maybe caution around including a lot of policy-driven goals or requirements, like you have to electrify the rest of your fleet within a certain number of years. That's all I got. Thanks.
Thank you, Michael. Appreciate it.
Okay, let's go to Janet Jarvis.
Thank you. I appreciate the time this afternoon. I've heard a lot of really good comments today, and I represent the Oregon Trucking Association, which is a broad-based organization with a variety of different kinds of members. And I think as we talk about moving towards ZEV vehicles, it's the comment that Eric made early on in the discussion about the technology just not being there for a large portion of our membership is a very true statement. Battery electric Class 8 trucks go about 200 miles now. In order for them to pencil out and work for one of our regional carriers, they would need to have a range of closer to 500 miles. And then you would need good charging infrastructure and truck parking to accommodate that. And so there's a whole range of infrastructure needs around that. So if you're building incentive programs, you might want to just think about who can be early adopters to this and what markets do you want to go after first. I know Keith is a member of mine, and Keith has got some electric Class 8 trucks coming, but he's got a limited capacity to use. He can't use them in all applications for his business. And so we need to think about where we can adopt and where the technology just hasn't caught up to that yet. And I think the other thing that needs to be considered in all of this, and I was glad that PGE was on, because there's a large concern in our industry for grid capacity to be able to even charge some of the larger trucks. My understanding is that it takes about the equivalent of 340 homes to charge a Class 8 truck. And so those kinds of issues need to be considered and thought about well in advance. as we go there. So my recommendation is that we look for specific markets that could be early adopters, that we consider grid capacity, and we look at truck parking as part of this plan. Thank you.
Thank you, Jana. Appreciate the comments. Mary, you got 1 minute and then we're gonna wrap it up. You're on mute.
That would take 30 seconds off. So really, this has really been an extremely helpful and informative session. The Oregon Department of Transportation is particularly interested in concepts for charging infrastructure, incentives and structuring those in particular, as opposed to the vehicles. So we would encourage you to, I think Morgan is the recipient of all future comments. We would encourage you to think deeply and clearly, other than ensuring that the Public Utility Commission approves make-ready programs, above and beyond that, what kinds of structures, loan programs, tax incentives, what criteria for explicitly for charging incentives? We would just like to make sure we hear that loudly and clearly from this group as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary. And thanks to all of you for attending today. It was great feedback. Really appreciate it. As I mentioned, we're going to continue to work as a team to consolidate all of the information from the various programs, including the ones that you've mentioned today. And later on, hopefully in August or September, we will have another listening session, and that will go out in the same way that you received this. And we'll also keep a list of the attendees for today and make sure that we invite you all back to ask more specific questions and get more specific feedback. I thank you all for coming, and if you have any additional feedback you'd like to provide, please send it via email, which I placed in the chat, and it should have been in the announcement as well. Have a great Tuesday.